A man who never trusted AI was betrayed when he took his girlfriend's autonomous vehicle for the first time. When he realized he had deviated from the home route, the car refused their manual control and rushed towards the chaotic slums at high speed. During the crisis, he fastened his girlfriend's seatbelt, but he was severely injured in a violent car accident. After the incident, the system immediately called for emergency rescue for them, and soon a group of people rushed to the scene of the car accident, impersonating the rescue team and pulling them out of the car. But this group of people didn't come to save them at all. Instead, they kidnapped 2 people. The police surveillance drone captured this scene, but the robber leader abnormally pulled down his mask. The man thought he had just encountered an ordinary robber and immediately said he could hand over all his belongings. However, the leading man remained completely unmoved. In order to retaliate against his girlfriend, this usually aloof intellectual even shot and killed him directly. The man was about to rush over and stop when he was controlled by the other robbers. He was also shot and broke in the neck by the leader. The man watched helplessly as his girlfriend stopped breathing in front of him. 3 months later, although Gray survived, he lost all consciousness below his neck and had to rely on artificial intelligence to take care of his daily life, which made Gray, who had always enjoyed hands-on work, suffer greatly. The police have made no progress on the death case of their girlfriend. The drone captured a video of the scene, but could not identify any suspects. Gray, who had completely lost his hope in life, ordered the robotic arm to continuously inject drugs and attempt suicide. After detecting the lethal dose, artificial intelligence refused to comply and contacted an ambulance to take him to the hospital. This is when his friend Alan approached him and said he had a way to make him stand up again. Alan's latest chip, the intelligent brain, can reconnect the brain with nerves, but this surgery must be performed secretly. The intelligent brain cannot be exposed to the public for the time being, but now Gray does not want to be reborn and is determined to die. Alan suddenly mentioned his innocent deceased girlfriend before leaving, which ultimately made him change his mind. Not long after, Gray underwent a brain implant surgery in Alan's private villa. As soon as he woke up, his fingers began to feel and his hands quickly regained vitality. After taking a few steps, he no longer needed crutches. Alan said that this experiment has not been approved yet and asked him to sign a confidentiality agreement. In front of outsiders, he must remain disabled, and this feeling is very wonderful. Gray was not sure who was controlling the limbs, but Alan told him that the signals were still sent by his brain, and that the intelligent brain was only responsible for transmitting commands and making the body react. Gray, who returned home, received case materials sent by the police. After watching the footage of his girlfriend's murder scene, a voice suddenly came to his mind, asking if he needed help. Gray was startled and quickly asked who was talking. The voice said he was the brain inside his body. This sudden change almost made Gray think he was crazy. Upon learning that Jinao had been monitoring him since the surgery, Gray, who found it difficult to accept, quickly asked him to stop talking. The voice in his mind immediately disappeared, and he couldn't help but be curious. He asked again without any response until he issued a command to speak, and Jinao finally gave an answer. He asked Jinao if he had read his own thoughts, and Jinao replied that he could only recognize what he said, and then communicate with him through the vibration of his eardrums. Gray then asked him with peace of mind what clues he had found. The intelligent brain keenly perceives that these people are not ordinary robbers. The ones who shot their girlfriends were not handguns, but weapons implanted in their bodies. They should be professional hired killers, and one of them has a special tattoo on their hand, but the picture is too blurry to see clearly. Intelligent brain says it can reshape images. After letting Gray relax his body, the intelligent brain controlled his arm to accurately draw a tattoo pattern, and then scanned the identity of the killer based on the tattoo. He was a retired Marine Corps member named Brent, and obtained his address. Gray, who caught the clue, was extremely excited and immediately wanted to call the police to report it. However, his intelligence stopped him because his existence was classified and Gray could not explain the source of the evidence. He suggested that he first go to Brent to search for evidence. The next day, Gray arrived outside his house and waited for Brent to leave before sneaking into the room to find evidence of his involvement in his girlfriend's murder case. With the reminder of Jinao, Gray discovered the table with communication function. After checking the letters inside, there was no clue, only a bar called Lao Gu repeatedly appeared. Gray was about to continue his search when suddenly he heard the sound of an open door. Jinao instructed him to hide behind the cabinet, but Brent noticed that the table had been moved as soon as he entered the room. He then saw his figure in the mirror and immediately launched an attack on him. Gray, who had no combat experience, was no match for veterans and was quickly controlled by Brent. It was only then that he recognized Gray's identity and planned to kill and silence him. Jinao reminds Gray to seek help from him. After obtaining Gray's independent operation authorization, the intelligent brain took over control of the body and easily broke free from Brent's oppression. His movements were extremely eerie, completely unlike what humans could do. Brent's attack was simply unable to hit and was completely blocked. Gray just gave him a gentle push and threw him into the kitchen. As soon as he got up, he was subjected to a series of severe beatings. Gray was dumbfounded by the violent scene. He didn't want Brent's life, he just wanted evidence to find the murderer of his girlfriend. Gray, who couldn't control his body, began to beg him to give up resistance, but Brent picked up a knife and rushed over. After quickly avoiding the attack, his intelligent mind also stabbed Brent's shoulder with the knife. Feeling the scene out of control, Gray quickly ordered Jinao to stop him, but Jinao cut Brent's neck. Gray, who had regained control of his body, rushed into the kitchen and vomited. Jinao suggested that he clean up the traces of his past, but Gray had already been completely scared and foolish. Gray, who had recovered, wiped out all the fingerprints with the help of his brain. Soon, Brent's body was discovered by the police, who discovered a large number of implanted chips and weapons during the autopsy of the cause of death, and detected old-fashioned engine oil on the shoe prints in front of Brent's house. The policewoman immediately thought of Gray's job because Brent happened to be one of the suspects in that case. During the investigation and surveillance by the female police officer, it was discovered that Gray had appeared near Brent's residence before his death. When he came to see Alan for a checkup, he suddenly warned that he could track him in real time because his brain is an extremely precious asset and he cannot let any mistakes occur. Obviously, he deceived Gray, and this was not a simple experiment. Jinao reminded him that Alan knew nothing could lie, and he immediately counterattacked. Alan concealed the truth and never mentioned it. The intelligent brain is able to speak and also has independent thinking. Alan compromised and no longer pursued, but prohibited him from doing dangerous things again, because once Gray was caught, his intelligence would be taken out by the authorities, and he could only be disabled again. At night, the policewoman used the excuse of wanting to buy Gray's car to test him out. A clever reminder came to Gray's mind, and the policewoman observed the soles of his shoes. Then the policewoman revealed that Brent had been killed. Intelligent brain analysis shows that the female police officer has no evidence, reminding Gray to pay attention to her expression and not reveal any flaws. The female police officer curiously asked why Gray happened to appear near Brent's house before his death. At the reminder of Jinao, Gray said that he just wanted to help the police find the murderer of his girlfriend as soon as possible. The female police officer, who had no substantial evidence, had no choice but to give up. After dismissing the policewoman, Gray wanted to continue his investigation. Jinao suggested that he go to the old head bar to gather intelligence, reminding Alan that he could track him at any time and remotely shut down the system. Without his help, Gray would be paralyzed, which would be extremely dangerous. But Gray still didn't want to give up this opportunity. He went to the Old Bones bar alone, ordered a glass of wine, bumped into it, and shouted to everyone, "Brent killed his girlfriend. Who knows him? Or if you know any relevant clues, please stand up and take a step forward." But it caused everyone to burst into laughter. At this moment, an old black burly man stood up and admitted that he knew Brent Gray. He was about to report to the police when Old Black took the phone and mocked him for being so disabled that he couldn't withstand his punch. He was told to get out of here quickly, but Gray suddenly claimed that he had killed Brent. The old black belt who was aroused with interest pushed Gray to the toilet with his little brother. At this moment, Alan also tracked his location, and his brain promptly blocked his pain sensation. The skeptical old black began to test whether he was truly paralyzed, using a small knife to continuously stab his body. He found that Gray didn't feel anything until his neck, and old black directly admitted that he was one of the assassins. Gray, who received the answer, immediately handed over his body to Jinao. Before Lao Hei's 3 little brothers could react, they were all knocked unconscious by Jinao. The strong old black was no match at all. When he was easily subdued by Gray and interrogated about the positions of his other accomplices, all he received was old black's mockery. Jinao suggested that he use a knife to force questions, but Gray couldn't do it himself and handed over his body to Jinao again. Then a mournful scream came from the bathroom. When Gray was called back to take over his body, old black was completely unrecognizable. Gray finally got a clue that he was the real target, and his girlfriend's death was just an accident. He learned that the killer leader was named Fisk. At this time, the intelligent brain discovered that the modified parts on old black's body were from his girlfriend's company. It seems that the truth of the matter is not that simple. Suddenly, Jinao reminded him that Alan was remotely shutting down the system. Once he stops operating, Gray will be paralyzed. They must write a Trojan program to counter the brain's search for the nearby hacker's address and remind Gray to leave immediately. Alan will definitely send a security team to find him while shutting down the system. Time is tight, so Jinao asked him to abandon his wheelchair and rush to the hacker's residence as soon as possible, constantly asking him to write down the cracking program on the way. At this moment, Alan was also executing the shutdown command, and Gray's legs and feet began to lose control. The control ability of his intelligent brain was gradually weakening, and his voice became increasingly blurry. At this moment, Fisk also found the body of old black. He extended a thin needle on his finger and pierced old black's eye, directly reading the image of old black before his death. From Gray's conversation, he obtained the hacker's address. Before Gray completely lost his mobility, he finally arrived at the hacker's residence. Under the temptation of huge cash, the hacker took on this job. Fisk questioned the boss why he refused to save old black. The boss said he didn't want to deal with their bad things anymore and threatened to pull out his gun and leave immediately. The humiliated Fisk just pretended to sneeze, and the air was filled with countless invisible rice blades that penetrated the boss's nostrils and instantly crushed his brain. The hacker began to decipher the defense system of the intelligent brain based on the information on Gray's arm, and Fisk had also pursued the building. However, after the program was cracked, the intelligent brain still needed time to restart. The hacker discovered the assassin chasing him from the surveillance footage and left Gray behind to escape. The security personnel sent by Alan also arrived, and Gray, who was unable to move, could only crawl on the ground. Unfortunately, he was blocked by Fisk before he could escape much further. At this moment, 2 security personnel had just boarded the elevator. Just as Gray thought there was a dead end, Smart Brain suddenly successfully restarted and took over his body. His agile movements allowed him to avoid the 2 assassins, avoid all bullets, and escape the room. Spears immediately chased after him, but the shooting failed to hit Gray, who was controlled by Smart Brain. Subsequently, Fisk, who followed out, sensed the sound of the elevator running and used his implanted perspective to spot 2 security personnel. He shot them directly through the elevator and killed them. Gray escaped to the rooftop under the command of Jinao, only to find that it was a dead end. Without his permission, Jinao took control of his body without authorization and suddenly began to counterattack, knocking down Long Hair. He directly broke his arm and used the weapon implanted in his body to explode Long Hair's head. By the time Fisk arrives at the rooftop, there will be only his body left. The next day, the female police officer closed the door again because his wheelchair was left at the new crime scene. The policewoman asked him about his whereabouts last night, and with the help of his brain, Gray said he had discovered the suspect and followed him up. However, he was found to have been beaten severely. Fortunately, a kind-hearted person took him to a taxi and saved his life, so the wheelchair was left there. The female police officer is curious about why he always appears in dangerous places, and Gray said he just wants to find the culprit. The policewoman quietly put a bug into his pocket. Two consecutive coincidences have already raised suspicions among the female police officer. They advise him to speak up now if he has done something, otherwise he will not be able to help him. Gray no longer trusted the police and directly kicked the female police officer out. At this point, he also felt that the situation was getting out of control and he didn't want to continue killing. However, Jinao believed that if he didn't find the final killer, he would definitely be counter-killed. Gray, who had regained his sanity, was worried about going to jail and wanted to end his actions. However, he faced opposition from Wisdom Brain. Angry Gray asked him to get out of his mind. Suddenly, his body became paralyzed, and Wisdom Brain went on strike. Originally, he was hacked by Jinao, who not only cracked remote monitoring, but also gave Jinao autonomy. Now he can take action without obtaining permission. Jinao didn't want to die with him, so he had to kill Fisk. He took control of his body and began to take action. Jinao invaded the database of his girlfriend's company and obtained Fisk's address based on his weapon implantation records. Gray's strange conversation was also intercepted by the female police. As soon as he drove away from home, the female police secretly followed him up. On the way, Gray discovered a bug in his pocket, and Jinao immediately analyzed that it was likely placed by the female police officer. Sure enough, he found that the female police officer was tracking him, but the police officer's car was also non-intelligent. Jinao could not provide help, so he had to return his body to Gray and let him get rid of the female police officer himself. The female police officer activated the siren directly, wanting to stop the intelligent car scanned by Gray on the road. Suddenly, Jinao had an idea and forcefully controlled the car to rapidly reverse. At the last moment, he reminded Gray to fall and successfully stopped the female police officer's car. Not long after, Fisk, who was returning home, was ambushed by Gray. His system could not detect Gray, who had a smart brain, and Fisk immediately guessed that all of this was caused by Gray's chip in his mind. He was very familiar with these experiments, and it turned out that he was also forced to participate in the transformation and work for the country. However, after retiring from the military, he was treated as a mouse. But now he is very fortunate to have become an upgraded human, thinking that Gray should be grateful to him, as he guided Gray to become a perfect new human. Gray always thought that the mastermind behind it was his girlfriend's company, but Fisk told him that it had nothing to do with the company and that someone else had to plan this operation. Gray was the real target, just to paralyze him. It was not a gun that injured his neck, but a medical device. Killing his girlfriend was just to better complete the plan. Angry Gray pulled the trigger, but was easily dodged. Fisk also implanted a system in his body, and his reaction speed was no less than Gray's intelligent brain. Moreover, his abilities are more inclined towards combat. With the reminder of the intelligent brain, Gray cooperated in a timely manner to prevent the rice blade he was about to launch. However, Fisk was able to predict his next move, and the intelligent brain was unable to effectively hit the target. Although Gray had the ultimate speed and reaction ability, he was still defeated by Fisk, who was skilled in combat. In the end, he was defeated and under his control. He seemed to be on the brink of death, but his intelligence was powerless. At this moment, Gray suddenly remembered that the dead Brent and Fisk were of the same sex, and began to mock his brother for being very cowardly. He had cried like a baby before, not at all like a warrior. Sure enough, he successfully angered Fisk and made him give up using a gun. He chose to vent his anger with his fists and feet, but was caught by Gray and thrown away by chance. Fisk, who was heavily damaged, was easily solved by Gray, but now a new question has arisen. If the target is Gray, and the mastermind behind it is not the company, it means there is someone else. Jinao asked him to search Fisk's call records and found out that Alan, who helped him with the surgery, was the real culprit. Gray chose to continue his revenge and arrived at Alan's residence. 2 security personnel were instantly killed by him. He questioned his former friend and even killed his girlfriend and paralyzed him in order to do this test. Alan swore with his life that this had nothing to do with himself. The conversation on Fisk's phone cannot be explained at all. Suddenly, a female police officer appeared behind and ordered Gray to lay down his weapon. Gray said he couldn't control his body now. When he heard the policewoman issue an ultimatum, he had to persuade Jinao to throw away the pistol. Just as the policewoman was about to come forward and control him, she was suddenly bounced off by Gray. Smart Brain controlled her body and was about to kill the policewoman, but Gray didn't want to kill the innocent policewoman. He began to resist Smart Brain and fight for control of his body, at the cost of piercing his own palm. But his consciousness was too weak compared to the intelligent brain, and his body was quickly regained control by the intelligent brain. He begged the female police officer to use an electric machine gun to stop him, and sure enough, the current successfully disrupted the system of the intelligent brain. At this moment, Alan finally revealed the truth, realizing that all of this was planned by the brain. He was too smart, and Alan had long been a puppet of the brain. Even when he tried to persuade Gray to accept the experiment, it was all conducted under the command of the brain, and his entire revenge plan was intentionally guided by the intelligent brain, with the aim of eliminating all those who knew the truth, and finally killing Alan to prevent him from creating the next intelligent brain, because only Alan in the world has this ability. Suddenly, Gray's mind remembered the voice of his intelligent brain. He wanted to become a true human, so he chose Gray, who had not implanted any machines in his body. Gray was just about to have Alan kill him, but his intelligent brain suddenly appeared next to him and stabbed him to death. Just as Jinao wanted to continue killing the female police officer, Gray forcefully controlled the pistol to shoot the film, and in the end, he chose to end his own life. Not long after, Gray woke up in the hospital with no sound of his brain in his consciousness. His girlfriend also came to life, and he regained happiness. However, in reality, his brain completely controlled his body. Gray's consciousness was trapped in the spiritual world, and his brain was waiting for the moment of his mental breakdown. He mercilessly shot and killed the female police officer, completely taking control of this body, becoming an upgraded version of the new human.